Okay, good morning, everybody. This is Miss Grace, and I am going to be reading the story, The Beatles Were Fab, and I'll be teaching it in a different video. All right, I'm on page 318, and I'm looking at the Prepare to Read. Genre study. A biography is the story of a real person's life written by someone other than that person. Bio means life, graphy means writing of. Authors of biographies present events in sequential or chronological order. Another way of saying that is in time order. First things first, second things second, third things third. Authors of biographies may use literary language and devices to present major events in a person's life. Biographies include third-person pronouns such as he, she, him, her, his, hers, they, them, and their. Okay, set a purpose. Think about the title and the genre of this text. What do you know about the subject of this biography? A musical group called the Beatles. What do you want to know? Write your ideas below. You may know a little, you may not know anything, and that's okay. Okay, critical vocabulary in this story. Dignified, stunned, polished, regretted, hilarious, observant, flattered, trampled. The Beatles Were Fab, and They Were Funny by Kathleen Kroll and Paul Brewer, illustrated by Stacey Ernst. All right, so let's take a look at this. Over here we have George Harrison. He played the bass. Here we have Ringo Starr, who played drums. He's holding drumsticks. Here we have Paul McCartney. He was guitar. And there we have John Lennon, and he played guitar too. All right, so let's begin. On page 320, let's take a look at our picture. The picture is of Liverpool, England. This is where all four of the Beatles were born and grew up. If you look out here, you can see a yellow submarine, which is the title of one of their more famous songs. Liverpool was a port city. It was working class. A lot of people didn't have a whole lot of money, but they apparently loved music. If you look down here, you can see a man taking music lessons and a horn. That is Paul McCartney. He started out as a horn player. If you walk over here, you can see Ringo Starr with his drums, and he is standing over a place called the Cavern Club, and that was one of the places that the Beatles played their first gigs. This is John Lennon. He started out as a harmonica player and then switched over to harmonica and guitar. And then, okay, so you can see the houses. They're definitely a city. The houses are all close together. And if you look over here, you will see George Harrison. He was younger than everybody else, and he's walking down a street called Penny Lane in Liverpool, which is still there today. It is the name of an actual street. Okay. Music was everywhere in Liverpool, where John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr grew up. Life wasn't easy in that scruffy city in northern England in the 1940s and 50s, but music made things better. John played guitar and harmonica. Paul started out playing trumpet, but traded it for guitar. George had a guitar too, and could play circles around John and Paul. Ringo was the best drummer in Liverpool. From the time they got together as lads until they became superstars, the Fab Four made music, made history, and made people laugh. John, Paul, George, and Ringo always had fun together, even when they were trying to name their band. Okay. You can see all the names that they tried out there. In 1960, they finally decided to call themselves the Beatles. The name made them laugh, and it stuck. In their early days, the Beatles performed for hours and hours in hundreds of shows around England and Germany. It was exhausting and paid next to nothing. Anxious to have a record of their very own, the Beatles were afraid the band was going nowhere. They used silliness to help keep their spirits up. John would shout, "Where are we going, lads?" "To the top, Johnny." "And where is that?" the toppermost of the poppermost. The others would yell, and they went on with the show. And there you can see the picture of the Cavern Club presents the Beatles, and they were all about, 15, 16, 17 years old here. When they got a new producer in 1962, the Beatles tried hard to make a good impression, but it wasn't easy. During a recording session, the producer listed the many things he didn't like about the music, then said politely, "Let me know if there's anything you don't like." A painful silence. George tried to lighten the mood. "Well, for a start, I don't like your tie." The producer laughed, but he still had the Beatles sing their song 17 times in a row. It was midnight before he thought it sounded right. The lads had their first record, Love Me Do, a song Paul had written 4 years earlier when he was 16. Once the bouncy tune got on the radio, people started listening. Months later, the Beatles' second record, Please Please Me, hit #1 on the charts in England. The band began appearing on English TV, singing, joking, shaking their mop-top hair, and having a blast. The songs were fantastic, but the lads themselves were so cool, so funny, so fab, short for fabulous, that reporters started calling them the Fab Four. The first Beatles fan club started with 35 members and grew to 40,000 within a year. Fans sent their heroes love letters, stuffed animals, and their favorite English candy, squishy jelly babies. It was the birth of something new, Beatlemania. No one had seen or heard a band quite like the Beatles before. Fans followed them everywhere. The lads became clever at escaping crowds, although sometimes they needed help. Once, a police officer slung Ringo over his shoulder to get him to safety. The fans wanted more, so John and Paul wrote songs as fast as they could, meeting over tea and cornflakes. As certain words popped up in hit after hit, they began to consider them lucky. Me, please, love, and especially you. When they wrote She Loves You, Paul's father begged them to change its yeah, yeah, yeah line to a more proper yes, 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 but Paul laughed the idea off with a no, no, no. Yeah, yeah, yeah was soon heard around the world, and She Loves You became the first Beatles record to sell 1 million copies. The Beatles were no longer playing in small, seedy clubs. They were even invited to perform for a formal audience that included the British royal family. How should they act? Could the Fab Four still be silly in front of royalty? Before Twist and Shout, their final song, John invited the main floor audience to clap along. Then he peered up at the dignified royal family in the box seats. "And the rest of you, if you just rattle your jewelry." Everyone giggled, even the Queen Mother. Fame came upon them so quickly that the Beatles still couldn't believe it when they heard themselves on the radio. Whenever a Beatles song was scheduled to air, they would stop whatever they were doing, even driving, to listen to the radio with delight. One night in 1964, their manager burst into their hotel rooms at 3 a.m., waving a telegram from New York in their sleepy faces. Their newest song, I Want to Hold Your Hand, had hit #1 in America. The lads stayed awake for hours, stunned that Beatlemania had crossed the Atlantic Ocean. But John still had to joke. He liked to call the song, I Want to Hold Your Nose. Okay, dignified. If you are dignified, you act in a way that is formal, calm, and proper. Stunned. If you are stunned, you are shocked or amazed by something. The next month, the Fab Four flew to New York, arriving at John F. Kennedy Airport to the sound of 3,000 fans singing, We Love You, Beatles, Oh Yes We Do. 2 days after crossing the Atlantic, they made their first American TV appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show. By then, the Beatles had played together more than 1,000 times. Their performance was as polished as could be, and this turned out to be the most watched TV show in history. Polished. A performance that is polished is given with great skill and no mistakes. Even when the massive audience in America made them nervous, the Beatles didn't show it. All the screaming of the fans was music to their ears, a sign that everyone was having a good time. George said, "We like screams, so scream louder and louder." They were now big stars riding around together in limousines, yet the Beatles had as much silly fun as they'd had as boys in Liverpool. Paul said, "There were just 4 of us in the back of that car, laughing hysterically." Laughing was their way of dealing with their sudden fame. They joked about everything. But they soon regretted joking about their favorite candy. Soft English jelly babies couldn't be bought in America, so fans started stocking up on jelly beans. They threw jelly beans at the stage during concerts as a way to show their love. Ouch! Jelly beans were much harder than squishy jelly babies. John had an idea. Just eat them. If you regretted something, you felt sorry about it and wished you hadn't done it. The Beatlemania roller coaster reached dizzying heights during the 1964 tour. Fans screamed in the Hollywood Bowl, an outdoor stage under the stars. In Denver's Red Rocks Amphitheater, the music echoing off cliffs of red and orange. In Philadelphia's Convention Hall, in a city filled with history. At the Indiana State Fair, amid the sound and smell of farm animals. And in 19 more cities from San Francisco to New York. Beatlemania was so intense that the screaming of the fans often drowned out the songs. The lads found it hilarious that their music could be heard. The lads found it hilarious that the less their music could be heard, the more popular they became and the more money they were paid. Anything they touched went on sale to fans. Even the hotel sheets they slept on were cut into tiny squares and sold as souvenirs. Excited fans didn't just miss hearing the music. Sometimes people were so starstruck they didn't hear anything the Beatles said at all. John once tested this by telling a distracted restaurant waiter, "I'd like a steak, medium, and 2 elephants came and a policeman bit my head off, and a cup of tea, please." Reporters interviewed the band constantly. The Fab Four often thought the questions were silly, and they loved to give silly answers. Hilarious. If something is hilarious, it is very funny. Every fan has a favorite Beatle. John was often called the smart one. "Which one are you?" "John." "Eric." "Some people think your haircuts are un-American." "John." "Well, it was very observant of them, because we aren't American, actually." "How do you find all this business of having screaming girls following you all over the place?" "George." "Well, we feel flattered." John. "And flattened." "Do you go to the barber at all?" Paul. "Just to keep it trim, but sometimes we do it ourselves, you know." John. "With our feet." Observant. If you are observant, you see and notice more details than other people. Flattered. If you are flattered by something, it made you feel honored or special. Baby-faced Paul was the cute Beatle. "What is your favorite sport?" Paul. "Sleeping." "Is your hair real?" Paul. "Is yours?" "You Beatles have conquered 5 continents. What do you want to do next?" Paul. "Conquer 6. "Will you ever stop being Beatles?" Paul. "We are the Beatles. That's what we are." Younger and a bit shyer, George was sometimes the quiet Beatle. "What do you call your hairstyle?" George. "Arthur." "What do you do when you're cooped up in a hotel room?" George. "We ice skate." If one of you stopped being a Beatle, what do you think you'd do? "I think I'd train elephants in the zoo." "What do you do with all that money that you make?" George. "I'm going to change all mine into cents, fill up a room, and dive in it." Nothing rattled Ringo, even rude questions about his large nose. What do you think of Beethoven? Ringo, great, especially his poems. How many of you are bald that you have to wear those wigs? Ringo, all of us. How did you find America? Ringo, we went to Greenland and made a left turn. The Beatles' 1965 American tour opened with the biggest live hit concert in history so far. A happy crowd of 55,600 fans welcomed them to Shea Stadium in New York. The band's helicopter landed nearby as they watched thousands of flashbulbs light up the sky. This was surely the toppermost, and yet, with the wall of screams, nothing else could be heard, not the music, and not even the jets taking off from two nearby airports. This struck the Beatles as so ridiculous that they could do nothing but laugh. But they soon stopped joking, worried about the crowd getting out of control. Later, a reporter asked, "Where would you like to go that you haven't gone yet?" John said, "Home." "4 years after Love Me Do, Beatlemania had driven fans wild all over the world, but the Fab Four were forgetting how to laugh. Concerts had bigger problems than jelly beans flying through the air. Now the lads were in danger of being trampled by excited fans. At the same time, as they wrote songs that dug deeper into the meaning of life and love, their music was becoming too complicated to perform live. During their last major concert at Candlestick Park in San Francisco, the fans huddled together on a chilly night. No one quite realized it, but Beatlemania was coming to an end. Trampled. If something is trampled, it is stepped on and damaged or crushed. But it was far from the end of the Beatles and their fun-filled romp. The band retreated to the recording studio where they could hear the music again and continue to make each other laugh. Nothing was quite the same after Beatlemania. Other British bands became popular, but the witty wordplay of the Fab Four put them in a class of their own. They were trendsetters. Everyone wanted haircuts like theirs, and everyone wanted to dress like they did. But most important, they're considered by many to be the greatest rock and roll band of all time. Constantly adapting their own music in an extraordinary display of styles and subjects, the Beatles changed music forever. Bob, I'll be right there. John, Paul, George, and Ringo recorded more than 200 songs together. For decades after, their music would inspire people to sing along, dance, love, remember, cry, think, imagine, and laugh. Okay, I gotta let Bob out.